The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
Okay, let's go.
We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased.
49.
The decision to recognize Israel was an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs. But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you. Both of them were against me on the situation, but as President of the United States, I paid no attention to them, carried out what I thought was right, and I had the support of the Congress, and I could do it, which is unusual in these days.
Could you tell us specifically that a lot of Jewish people were against you too?
Oh, well, there were a lot of Jewish people against me because they wanted the whole of Palestine. As I say, they wanted to drive all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
Seriously, unbelievable, the information that's out there. And a big thanks to my buddy Eric, who sent that, which he said he found on TikTok. And if you go into TikTok and type Harry Truman Israel, you'll get that exact speech that he gave in 1948. Literally, President Harry Truman gave that exact speech in 1948, and he talked about how, you heard him, how basically he had to divide this up to try to make two people happy. What was interesting, and again, I highly recommend if you ever want to fact check me, that's totally cool. And I'll tell you where I get everything from. Again, that one, go to TikTok, search Harry Truman Israel, and you'll see a black and white grainy photo or grainy video. Actually, not even that grainy, but there's several copies of the two speeches. And what's interesting is, you hear cut 49 at the beginning or right around the middle. And so you can see them kind of hitting the marquee and starting up on the second part of that. But I wanted to start off today with that. Man, we got so much to cover. We have so much to cover today. Oh my gosh. Honestly, this is such an unbelievably complicated situation. But a couple things I wanted to point out in that, that's President Harry Truman in 1948 when all this started. And you hear him refer to the country as Palestine and dividing up Palestine. So that right there, to me, kind of puts to rest ChatGPT put it to rest in a previous episode. But again, you're hearing from President Harry Truman in 1948. He's referring to the country as Palestine. So obviously, prior to that, that's what Israel was called. That's what that area was called. It was Palestine. And the reason I wanted to start off with that is, that fundamentally is at the heart of the argument here. And again, I'd ask you, let's float up to 30,000 feet and look at this objectively right now. You've got billions, actually tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people that are literally protesting all around the world right now to free Palestine. And so it all goes back to this. It all goes back to 1948, and it wasn't just the United States. Great Britain was a huge part of this. I think France was involved. But the fact that, the Palestinian people were absolutely displaced from their country. That's what everyone's mad about. That's what everybody is arguing, and there's so much that is clouding that. But when I listen to Harry Truman, I was like, okay, that's the baseline. We're starting there. We're starting in 1948. This is coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States at that time. Therefore, I get it. I get why Palestinian people and other folks that, sympathize with the people. Again, the people. I'm talking about the people. This is where all of this comes from. All right, I forgot to introduce myself. Anyway, hey everybody, Ray Star, Deep Shallow Dive, episode 42. And oh man, got a lot of feedback yesterday from that episode, which was awesome. And one of the biggest things that came through was that I had a few people, actually more than a few, and a couple really good conversations where people are like, oh my God, I feel like this stuff is like making a lot of sense now. And what they were talking about was, the concept of panic war, Israel. We need more money for Ukraine. Biden mentioned Taiwan. We lump the money needed for the border. You put all that into an omnibus bill and you do the process of continuing resolution, which we've talked about, and create, and now watch, let's see if this happens. I bet you in a week or so, there's going to be, again, another humongous, obviously hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe $1 trillion aid package, omnibus bill that needs to get passed. And then the other part of it was connecting the dots of why the Republicans are not supporting Jim Jordan. And by the way, there was some stuff about Jim Jordan and, he was an amazing wrestler at Ohio State. And I know there's some things that were shady about a situation with him and I think sexual abuse of some of the wrestlers. I honestly don't know much about that. I have read a couple things, but I haven't really dug in. But I did want to acknowledge that I do know that exists in case anybody out there is like, oh, he has no clue about, Jim Jordan's past. I do. I absolutely do. But I haven't dug into it to really look at that story. But again, say what you will about him, and let's put that aside a second. The one thing about Jim Jordan that I like is the guy is incredibly fiscally responsible. And so he has been one of the people that, like I said yesterday, has opposed this sort of blank check mentality when it comes to funding of Ukraine. And again, if you listen to the portion of President Biden's Oval Office address from last Thursday that I played for you, he set it up. He really set it up. And he's like, and that's why I am asking Congress for $100 billion in, new aid, $60 billion for Ukraine, and then the other 40 being split among Israel, Taiwan. We haven't talked about that, like I said yesterday, but it's almost like he let the cat out of the bag with that one. And then the southern border, which again, like I said yesterday, prior to recently, that wasn't even recognized as a problem. And now we're asking for tens of billions of dollars to put towards that. So, those dots kind of connected yesterday, and I hope they connected for you. And if you didn't listen to episode 41, go back and give it a listen. The other thing real quick is I did want to apologize. I actually go back and listen to my episodes probably twice. And I don't know, for some reason I didn't like my tone yesterday when I was describing the situation in terms of humanitarian aid going into Gaza, but then thinking that, if the Hamas is as barbaric as they are, how do they not expect Hamas to just take that aid? That's such a disconnect to me, but I think I worded it a little, I don't know. I just didn't like the way I said it. So anyway, didn't mean to come off like a Weisenheimer on that when I talked about the strawberry mango sparkling water or something like that. But again, my point was, and I stick by my point, And that is, I just don't understand how, one day they are the most barbaric humans on the planet, and then the next day there's $100 million of aid going in there, and then supposedly they are the ones that control there, and they live among the people. So how do you distinguish between them and the people? How are you even distinguishing that they're not getting and being the beneficiary of that aid? Okay, that was a mouthful. All right, let's jump into it. I've got a variety of things. Let's start with this hospital situation. This was a bombing of a hospital in Gaza last week. Incredibly sad. From what has been reported, roughly 500 or so innocent civilians who are basically just seeking shelter there were killed in this. And obviously, the Israelis said it wasn't them. The Hamas folks said it wasn't them. President Biden even came out and said it wasn't Israel. He actually even said that in his State of the Union address. And then you had the publications, actually all the publications that originally reported it as being an Israeli strike. I'm talking about the BBC, New York Times, CNN, basically all the organizations that up until this, everybody seems to believe everything they say. But then now when they came out saying it was an Israeli strike, a few days later, they all retracted. So let me play for you the things that I found. All right, first, so this is the original BBC clip that came out. So this is the absolutely first thing reported.
The Israeli military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes. Because, when we've seen rockets being fired out of Gaza, we never see explosions of that scale. We might see half a dozen, maybe a few more people being killed in such rocket attacks. But we've never seen anything on the scale of the sort of explosion on the video I was watching earlier, which, as you say, is still to be verified.
Okay, again, so when that came out, the New York Times, who else? CNN, MSNBC, you name it, actually. Pretty much everybody kind of corroborated that story. And then this is President Biden speaking last Thursday.
Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis.
I mean, it doesn't take a genius to piece together that obviously Israel gets their military equipment from the United States. So if that was done by the Israelis, that's a bad look for the good US of A. Okay, so then that was Biden. And then after that, here is BBC's follow-up. Actually, I'm sorry. First, here is MSNBC. So after BBC came out, MSNBC came out, and then I'm going to play for you MSNBC's clip, and then I'll chime in again.
The explosion seems to have taken place in a courtyard in front of the hospital where families were gathering, believing, fatally, as it turned out, that they would be safe if they were within hospital grounds. The Israeli military, at this point, is not providing any evidence to back up its claims that this was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. They are citing intelligence that they have not yet made public. We should also say that this kind of death toll is not what you normally associate with Palestinian rockets. These rockets are dangerous, they are deadly. They do not tend to kill hundreds of people in a single strike in the way that Israeli high explosives, especially these bunker buster bombs that are used to target these Hamas tunnels under Gaza City, do have the potential to kill hundreds of people. And we should say finally that there are instances in the past where the Israeli military has said things in the immediate aftermath of an incident that have turned out not to be true in the long run. And the one example I'll give you is that when the Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed in the occupied West Bank, the Israeli military initially said that she was killed by Palestinian gunmen, and it was only months and months later that they admitted that it was likely an Israeli soldier who fired the fatal shot.
All right, so that was MSNBC's clip, which I think came out second. And so then BBC, like I said, they kind of revised their story, and so here's that.
Ever since the explosion happened last night at around 7 p.m. local time, the BBC Verified team has been analysing all the images and video that have emerged. You can see where the hospital is located within Gaza City. And this footage shows what appears to be the courtyard car park of the hospital in flames. We've been able to establish that that's what it is from the shape of the buildings. Now, the Al Jazeera television station was broadcasting live from Gaza at the time. You can see a series of bright lights in the air. We don't know exactly what these are. The Israeli army says there was a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. Then you can see a flash, and that's followed shortly afterwards by a big fireball. Our verification teams have looked at these images and can tell from the roofs and from other skyline details illuminated by the flames that it was in the main courtyard of the hospital. Next, they've been looking at daylight images taken this morning. Here you can see quite a lot of fire damage to the cars, but most of the buildings surrounding it are still mostly intact and standing, and there's actually a relatively small crater. Now, we've shown these images to a number of weapons experts, and while they couldn't come to a firm conclusion, several of them told us that if the explosion had been caused by the type of bomb normally used by Israeli forces, the crater would have been bigger and there would have been more damage to the buildings. One way of trying to establish what hit this hospital is by studying bomb or missile fragments at the scene, but our team on the ground and the team here haven't seen any. Now, look at this image we found from last night of two men searching through the crater we showed you earlier. The logo on their vests is from the Palestinian police, from the Explosive Ordnance Department. We don't know what, if anything, they recovered. The Islamic Jihad movement put out a statement today saying the explosion was caused by Israeli aerial bombing and claiming that they have the remnants of the explosive head, but they haven't yet provided any evidence of this. What's not in dispute is that there were a very large number of casualties, according to Palestinian officials. Mostly, we think, of people who've been sheltering in the hospital from Israeli airstrikes, sleeping on the grass here. To establish the exact truth of what caused them, you'd need an independent investigation. But that's not going to happen in what is an active war zone.
All right, so that was BBC's, I guess, revised commentary. Think of it what you will. And then this also got captured by Al Jazeera cameras originally. And so BBC, again, originally used the Al Jazeera footage to make their initial claim. And then, as you heard, they kind of retracted that. So let me play you, I guess, Al Jazeera's retort.
On the 17th of October 2023, hundreds of Palestinians were killed when the al-Ahli Arab hospital in Gaza was bombed. Officials in Gaza blame the blast on an Israeli airstrike. The Israeli army denies responsibility and claims the attack was due to a failed rocket launch by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They say they used Al Jazeera footage to allegedly confirm these claims.
But you're asking me for proof? You don't need to get proof from me. All you need to do is switch over to Al Jazeera, who broadcasted it live, and you can actually see. I got a screen caption just for you to see. This is Al Jazeera from last night.
Our digital investigations team, SANAD, decided to investigate these claims and conducted an in-depth analysis of this Al Jazeera video, along with several other videos from multiple sources, and established a detailed second-by-second timeline of the events. By analysing Al Jazeera's live stream starting at 1845, The team was able to identify 4 Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, targeting the area near the hospital, starting at 18:54:28, then 18:55:03, then 18:57:42, and then 18:58:04. That's military time for just before 7 p.m. local. The team cross-referenced this video with another, captured by a camera, situated south of Tel Aviv, showing a wide view of the Gaza Strip. That video shows a series of rocket launches from Gaza. That video clearly shows how the Iron Dome intercepted these rockets. Going back to the Al Jazeera live feed at 18:59:35, we can see a single rocket launched from Gaza. This is the rocket in question. This rocket can also be seen on the Israeli video. 15 seconds later, Al Jazeera's live feed shows that the same rocket was intercepted at exactly 18:59:50. This interception has the same afterglow seen in previous interceptions. A closer look at the video captured by the Al Jazeera live feed shows the rocket being completely destroyed and broken apart in the sky. According to all feeds and videos analyzed, this rocket was intercepted and was the last one launched from Gaza before the bombing of the hospital. 5 seconds after that interception, an explosion in Gaza can be seen, followed 2 seconds later by a much larger explosion. This is the strike that hit al-Ahli Arab Hospital. As a result, Al Jazeera Digital Investigations Team found no grounds to the Israeli army claim that the strike on the al-Ahli Arab Hospital in Gaza was caused by a failed rocket launch.
All right, so that was from Al Jazeera. Now, I will say after that, Israel did temporarily shut down foreign news networks, including Al Jazeera. So it looks like it got rid of, or I don't know what they mean by shut down. Let's see. The temporary suspension will enable authorities to stop broadcasting the channel, close offices in Israel, shut down its site, and revoke press credentials. Okay, so it looks like they shut down foreign news networks after that. I'm going to add something to the podcast, and I'm going to credit my main man, Brad Ford Hershey, my roommate from college, and then also a couple other guys from Orange High School, Brian Sachs being one of them. They used to say, and I think it was from Howard Stern, but they would say, shucky ducky quack quack. And I don't even know what that means. I'll have to look it up. But I always found it funny when you'd say shucky ducky quack quack. So I'm going to start saying shucky ducky quack quack when I find something interesting, because I realized I say, that's interesting. I say that way too much. So get ready for shuggy duggy quack quack. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk about, and my main man, OC Nav, my buddy Nav, who lives here in Orange County, we had a good conversation about this the other day, actually last Thursday, and he brought this up, and we kind of talked it through together, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a good thing to understand. So last week, or I think on Friday, when Israel was basically saying they are going to begin their ground invasion, which they have not done yet, and then they basically, I mean, this is pretty crazy. They released like pamphlets in the air into the northern part of Gaza, and on those pamphlets, it pretty much alerted everybody, hey, you get out of town in the next 24 hours because we're going to be invading. So again, they dropped pamphlets in the air. They basically gave the people of that are living in the northern half of Gaza, they wanted them to relocate to the south. So I wanted to just put this in perspective because, you know, there were a lot of people that were like, oh, that's very nice of them. And I mean, it is nice of them. Obviously, you're kind of warning civilians of what you're going to do. Okay, I totally do respect that. But let me put this in perspective of what that means. So Gaza has a population of roughly 2 million. It's 2.048 million. Half of them live in the north, half of them live in the south. So 1 million people were told to evacuate their homes in the north and relocate to the south within 24 hours. So to put that in perspective, Los Angeles has a population of 3.849. I'm not talking about Los Angeles County, just Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles. And then Orange County, the overall county of Orange County, which is like a city, size-wise is probably somewhat similar to the city of Los Angeles. That population is roughly the same, 3.168 million. So imagine California gets into a battle with Nevada, and Nevada says, hey, we're going to invade, and then tells 3.1 million people who live in Los Angeles that they have 24 hours to relocate to Orange County. I mean, what a shit show that would end up being, and probably that's just not even feasible. So like, I did want to talk about that because that just was something that, got spun in a kind of in a beneficial way. And I'm sorry if you think about the logistics of that, I mean, that's not even doable. And then again, you're talking about people uprooting their entire life within 24 hours and moving. I didn't find that appropriate. So I thought I would kind of put that in perspective. All right, so the next thing I want to share, honestly, this is probably the most serious thing I have shared. And I don't even know if I should say what's amazing, but this is from a very good Jewish friend of mine. And he sent me this clip from CBS Morning. It was the CBS Morning News, and I believe it was like maybe 4 or 5 days ago. And the one thing he talked to me about, and he doesn't want to be named, but he said, hey, it's not Israel. You got to separate between Israel and Netanyahu. We're not fans of him. And, when he said that, it kind of started to make, I guess, some sense if you think about what I said in earlier episodes, I think episode 4, where, again, they refer to Netanyahu as Israeli Trump. And I'm not saying Trump is like that, by the way. But it does connect the disconnect as to why it seems like Jewish people in America might not support Netanyahu, but they absolutely support their country and they stand with Israel. And then I asked him, I said, do you stand with Netanyahu? And he said, no, I stand with Israel. I stand with my country. I don't stand with the government in place. And that, that sentiment was echoed in, I think it was episode 5, where I played you the clip from 60 Minutes, where the brothers and sisters in arms were, heading up the fight against Netanyahu and the reforms he was trying to enact in the judicial system. And it's what Charlie Kirk talked about in that episode about, the judicial system. And now all those riots and protests, they're gone. They've been silenced. Well, not really silenced, but again, nationalism now, it's almost like there's a bigger problem. Also, if you remember the clip I played from the gentleman a couple episodes ago where he was like, I'm proud to be Jewish. I am unequivocally a proud Jewish man, but I don't stand for the way the Palestinian people have been treated. Anyway, it was interesting to hear that from my friend. And, I asked him, I said, God, is this really how a lot of you feel? And he said, yeah. And that is why there is such a division between many of us and Netanyahu. So that was pretty enlightening to me, again, coming from somebody I know. So anyway, my friend sent me this clip. This is from CBS, so it's not like it's from some random thing. But it's a pretty moving clip, and so give this a listen.
They keep saying leave the Gaza Strip. Where to? They bombed everything.
In Gaza, it's the youngest who are paying the ultimate price. Tiny bodies covered in blood as exhausted doctors try to save their lives. Israel says it's targeting Hamas's leaders. But at what cost? The death toll in the besieged Palestinian territory has surged past 1,000 in just 5 days. Despite fierce international criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also ordered a complete blockade of Gaza, meaning Israel won't allow food, fuel, or water in until Israeli abductees are returned home, only amplifying the misery of the more than 2 million people who live there. Over half are under the age of 18, just children who had no say in Hamas's brutal assault on southern Israel, but who are losing everything.
They're wiping us out. This is genocide. It's not even an attack anymore.
Israel has repeatedly told residents to evacuate their homes, but Rafah, the only functioning crossing with Egypt and only way out of Gaza, has been repeatedly hit by the Israeli military.
We had memories. We had dreams. I don't know what to do.
This stuff seriously breaks your heart. Ugh. I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, maybe, like I said yesterday, we've got the wrong leaders. Everyone has the wrong leaders. You know, are they leading for themselves or are they leading for the people? You know, this Netanyahu situation really creates an interesting dichotomy in this because, again, you know, it would be different if it was like completely united people, but it's not. You know, they're united in their love for their country, and I totally respect that 100%. But the leadership, you know, another friend of mine, I asked him this question. I said, are you guys fans of Netanyahu? And his answer was, in peacetime, no. In wartime, yes. And I was like, I don't know what to think of that answer. Like that's not the answer I'd like to hear, because to me that is a little bit conflicting. It really is. All right, I want to cover a couple of other things. Another interesting twist was, I don't know if you guys saw, but Greta Thunberg, you know, the little young climate activist who looks like the Chucky doll. She's always like angry and she's always got a scowl on her face. Anyway, she posted a I support Gaza tweet. And so now Israel has removed Greta Thunberg from curriculum over pro-Palestinian message. So now here's another person that, again, prior to this, was probably loved by that group, and now she is not. I'm sorry, it wasn't a tweet. She posted a photo on Instagram of herself and 3 others holding signs in favor of Palestinians in Gaza. The signs included phrases like Free Palestine and Stand with Gaza. That's from Newsweek. All right, so the next clip I'm going to play from you, another friend of mine sent me, and this is Noam Chomsky. I know a lot of you probably do know Noam Chomsky, but some of you might not. But this guy is incredibly highly regarded. He is one of the top linguistics, I guess, intellectuals in the world, and he's created this entire linguistics hierarchy and advocates the learning of languages. But he's also a very well-respected liberal, I guess, professor or spokesperson or just intellect. probably, I think the word intellect is the best way to describe him, but he's known to champion liberal causes, and he's very outspoken critic of United States foreign relations. So give this a listen that she sent me.
Part of the tragedy of the Palestinians is that they have essentially no international support for a good reason. They don't have wealth, they don't have power, so they don't have rights. That's the way the world works, you know. Your rights correspond to your power and your wealth. Same inside the United States. We shouldn't be surprised to see it. If you're a poor black kid in Roxbury, you don't have the rights of a rich person living in the suburbs, right? Same in the international arena. So the Palestinians, I mean, they may get, you know, statements of support, but and nobody's going to do much for them, especially when the U.S. Threatens anyone who might try to do something. What's called the national interest turns out to be the interest of dominant domestic forces in U.S. society. So the national interest means the interests of the very rich, major corporations, the ones who set government policy and so on. That's the national interest, and not the population. The population is basically irrelevant. The population often strongly opposes government policy, and they're simply disregarded. Overwhelmingly, people say there should be much higher taxes on the wealthy. What happens? Taxes on the wealthy go down, you know, and it's the same on issue after issue. We do not live in a society in which the public determines policy. The public's around, you know, but basically disregarded unless they force themselves to into the system by serious activism.
That was pretty intelligently said. I've listened to a lot of his stuff, and I'll be honest, I agree with half of them, and then half of them I don't agree with, but that one was hard to poke a hole in. So anyway, I really appreciate my friend, she did not want me to say her name, who sent me that. Seriously, I told you guys I'm getting so many good clips from friends that it's basically turning me into like a narrating DJ. I'm just like, and now the next clip from so-and-so. But that's awesome, actually. Oh my God. Because again, like I said, it's overwhelming how much information is out there. And obviously, you know, I try to find as much as I can, but this is great. And again, I really encourage everybody. I would love to have anything you'd like me to look at. You can send it to me directly if we know one another. If not, deepshallowdive@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, deepshallowdive.com. There's a contact us. You can submit it there. If you are on Instagram, we are there on @deepshallowdive. You can find the Instagram profile. We have a Facebook group page. Again, Deep Shallow Dive there as well. Same thing with TikTok @deepshallowdive. And then you can also send messages through YouTube if that's where you listen to our podcast, which again, they're all available on the YouTube platform as audio-only versions of the podcast. Okay, so next I'm going to play, I actually have gotten this from a couple people, and she's awesome. This woman is a powerhouse. Her name is Claire Daly, and she is an Irish woman and member of the European Parliament. And man, she drops dimes. She really does. I highly recommend finding her on Instagram. Claire Daly, C-L-A-R-E, last name D-A-L-Y. She'll come up right away. And man, she really delivers, in my opinion, some very, very good, articulate, and passionate takes on various things. You know, I'm going to be doing an episode on the Nord Stream pipeline, and she's one of the folks that is going to be part of that. But give this a listen. This is a 1-minute clip that she delivered last week, and it's really good. And afterward, I'll kind of talk through some of the things, because that Irish accent sometimes is hard to understand.
The main agents of instability in the so-called Middle East are Europe and its overgrown colony in North America. Britain and France built instability into the region. It was Britain that planted the seeds of Israel's apartheid regime in Palestine, divide and rule, just as they did in Ireland, and the West never had any qualms about backing dictators as long as they protected our interests. So how did overthrowing Mossadegh promote stability? Was the Iran-Iraq war good for security? Did backing the Mujahideen do us any, cover us in glory? Every so-called Western intervention, the occupation of Iraq, the disaster of Afghanistan, the NATO bombing of Libya, the backing of Islamist extremisms in Syria, Saudi's genocidal assault on Yemen, all produce seismic waves of instability that tremor down for decades, leaving broken countries, hobbled economies, violence, trauma and permanent conflict.
All right, she killed that. So let me go through a couple things. First of all, she talked about Britain and France and America being kind of the tyrants. And by the way, Great Britain, I'm going to DSD them because there's a lot to that little island. Anyway, she brought up Mossadegh. Mossadegh was actually the Iranian leader that was overthrown in 1952, and then the Shah took his place. I will say personally, I'm a fan of the Shah. Mossadegh did nationalize oil, which was awesome, but he was also very socialist. So, I can't say that I was totally in favor of him, Mossadegh, because again, I was more in favor of the Shah, but he did nationalize oil, so that was amazing. But then that's why he was overthrown, and then the U.S. placed the Shah into power because the Shah was going to play ball with the U.S. when it comes to oil, which he did over the next 25 years. And then in 1979, actually in 73, the Shah said, hey, once the 25-year deal is over, and that cut, by the way, was 85 them, 15 Iran, or actually I think it was 86 and 14. So in 1973, the Shah said, I'm not going to be renewing that. And then that was probably his biggest mistake. He let that cat out of the bag too early. And then 6 years later, in 1979, he was overthrown. Ayatollah Khomeini comes in, and your boy Ray D ends up living in America. That's the cliff notes of that one. Then she talked about the Iran-Iraq war. Again, that was no stability. The Mujahideen, that was the Afghani rebel fighters that the U.S. backed in the late 70s because the Soviet Union, which was a world power at the time, was invading Afghanistan. So we backed, rebel fighters, and that didn't turn out too well. Then the Afghanistan 20-year war, which we've talked about several times, she talked about that, which, again, that one, think about it. After 20 years, $8 trillion, Afghanistan is currently run by the Taliban again. So it's like they're back for round two. Libya, that is going to be a really good one. That's a whole deep, shallow dive. But again, that's a situation that there's a lot more to that story than what meets the eye. Same thing with Syria and Yemen. Those are all countries that had instability, or instability was created into that country to create chaos. And I really am interested in all of that. So we will deep, shallow dive into all those. All right, this next clip I'm going to play for you. Honestly, I received this last week, and then I received it repeatedly from different folks. And to be honest with you, I really tried to vet this out myself, even though the people that sent it to me are folks that I truly respect their opinions, and I know they do a lot of vetting. But it's a clip from Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan, if you remember, he's the British journalist of Indian descent. He was mentioned a couple episodes ago. He has his own show, I think on Peacock. I know he's on MSNBC all the time. He's a super popular guy among liberals. And then this was in 2018, a segment that he was part of for The Intercept. And then The Intercept is an award-winning news organization, and this is founded by Pierre Omidyar, who actually is a Persian guy, but he was the founder of eBay and a philanthropist. So pretty big guy. And The Intercept, again, is very, very credible according to basically everyone all the time. Now, it'll be curious to see if this story, by the way, came out in 2018, and it really didn't ruffle any feathers, but now it looks like it's reemerging as things often do, and is definitely ruffling some feathers. So give this a listen. I think this is going to be probably one of, if not the most interesting thing in the 9 parts of this series so far.
The Palestinian militant group Hamas has carried out brutal acts of terror against Israeli civilians, and Israeli and American leaders are always keen to tell us how dangerous and evil Hamas is.
The inhumanity of Hamas.
I have no sympathy for Hamas.
That keep shelling Israel with thousands of rockets and mortar shells.
But what if I told you that Israel helped create Hamas? Officially, Hamas, which is the acronym for an Arabic phrase meaning Islamic Resistance Movement, was founded in 1987, at the start of the first Palestinian Intifada, or uprising against the Israeli occupation. But its roots were planted much earlier. The Hamas founder, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, was a half-blind, disabled Palestinian cleric and member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood had been repressed by the Egyptians in Gaza prior to 1967, but once the Israelis invaded and occupied the Strip, they didn't just turn a blind eye to these Islamists, they encouraged them. See, the Israelis, especially right-wing Israelis, wanted to undermine the power of the dominant Palestinian political force at that time, the nationalist PLO, at the heart of which was the secular Fatah party of Yasser Arafat, their bête noire.
بغصن الزيتون في يدي وببندقية الثائر في يدي.
By empowering Sheikh Yassin and the Muslim Brotherhood, Israeli leaders thought they could divide and rule the occupied Palestinians, play them off against each other, secular nationalists against religious Islamists. So in 1978, when Yassin wanted to officially register his Islamic Association, which was basically the precursor to Hamas, the Israelis were only too keen to help. Yassin built and grew a network of Islamist social institutions across Gaza, including schools and clubs and mosques, and Israel helped fund some of those projects. Most American politicians have no clue about any of this, although the former Republican Congressman Ron Paul once made this point on the floor of the House.
Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
Arafat himself told an Italian newspaper, quote, Hamas is a creature of Israel. He even claimed that former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin admitted as much to him, calling it a fatal error. Now, you might be wondering, why should I believe mad Ron Paul or the famously shady Yasser Arafat? Well, you don't have to. You can believe top Israeli and US officials who've basically owned up to all this. Brigadier Yitzhak Segev, for example, who was the Israeli military governor in Gaza, and later told a New York Times reporter that he helped finance the Islamic movement. The Israeli government gave me a budget, he said, and the military government gives to the mosques. Colonel David Hakam, who worked in Gaza in the late 1980s as an Arab affairs expert in the Israeli military, has admitted that the original sin was Israeli support for Yassin in the late 70s. But at the time, he has argued, nobody thought about the possible results. Well, Avner Cohen did. Cohen was the Israeli official who was responsible for religious affairs in Gaza for more than 2 decades, and who now says, quote, Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. Yeah, Cohen's words. He actually wrote an official report to his superiors in the mid-1980s, warning them not to play divide and rule in the occupied territories and calling on Israel to, quote, break up this monster before this reality jumps in our face. But no one else on the Israeli side really took the possibility of blowback seriously at that time. They never do they? Hamas has since killed far more Israeli civilians than any secular Palestinian militant group, and its leaders have been pretty viciously anti-Israeli and even anti-Semitic in their rhetoric.
لن نعترف بإسرائيل. لا مكان لكم بيننا ولا مستقبل لكم بين الأمم. إنكم إلى زوال.
Sheikh Yassin would eventually be assassinated by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza.
Sheikh Yassin and its organization, the Hamas, are responsible to the killings of more than 400 Israelis. So the question shouldn't be why now. I think it should be why not before.
Why not before? Well, because before, Israel was actually nudging and winking at Yassin and co., building them up as a rival to Arafat's Fatah. The die was cast for blowback. Blowback, incidentally, that they decided to double down on when they assassinated Yassin.
You can hear the crowds chanting for Hamas, and any idea that this operation would actually suppress or diminish that organization seems to be ill-judged.
The inconvenient truth is that Hamas is in part a creature of Israel's own making, an enemy that Israel spent more than 20 years helping to build up, and then spent the next 20 years, the past 20 years that is, trying to bomb, besiege, and blockade out of existence. The 3 Gaza wars fought by Israel against Hamas since 2008 killed around 2,000 Palestinian civilians and a dozen Israeli civilians. That's the real human cost of blowback. David Long, a former Middle East expert at the US State Department under Ronald Reagan, told journalist Robert Dreyfus, "I thought the Israelis were playing with fire. I didn't realize they'd end up creating a monster. But I don't think you ought to mess around with potential fanatics. It's a lesson both the Israelis and the Americans never seem to learn, though. And as usual, innocent people, in this case Palestinians and Israelis, continue to lose their lives as a result."
All right, so if you want to watch that clip, it's called Blowback, how Israel went from helping create Hamas to bombing it, and it's in The Intercept, and you can find it on YouTube, and it's all over the internet, actually, and all over TikTok, by the way. And I'll put a link in the show notes also. But that again was Mehdi Hassan, The Intercept, titled Blowback. All right. Well, everybody, I think that is all for today. Man, we covered a lot of ground. That was a lot of stuff, a lot of clips, but a lot of good stuff. And then we will do part 10 here tomorrow, hopefully. There may be a day separation. I don't know. I'm going to try to finish it out for tomorrow. If you do not see a new podcast episode tomorrow, then know that it will air on Wednesday. All right. Thanks, everybody. I hope this has been valuable, and call a spade, which we definitely did this episode.
This episode was brought to you by Boost Liquid Vitamins. Wake up, take your Boost, start your day. Drink your vitamins, build your immune system with Boost. Available on Boost.com.